Hello there folks, this is Ferengi on board. Welcome to my channel, a place where I discuss different topics about spirituality, introspection and game interpretation from time to time. My playing Heroes of the Storm with the Lost Vikings just to sharpen my skills and casual games. I present several videos about my video game when I have something significant to show or when I actually really want to show something. And upon these, I prefer giving people and humanity answers to certain questions that I find, and I feel people might have slight difficulty answering them. So all these are provided through the wisdom I have gathered and through the answers I have been receiving from the universe. So never try to take whatever I say for granted. And also one good tip in life: never try to take for granted something that does not belong to your own experience. People have experienced different things, and my truths are what I have checked, and I am also very knowledgeable of the fact that my truths may not necessarily apply to others, so just feel free to take them as guidance at least. So the question for today that I found on Quora is there anything beyond law? Now, people nowadays don't understand one principle. The idea of law is nothing else than a principle of control. We live in a three-dimensional world, okay, and ever since I was young, I said that if we live in a three-dimensional world of physics, okay, there are definitely three dimensions within us as well, because it has to be some kind of there has to be some kind of even specification, right? Three dimensions outside, there must be three dimensions within. And I would call those dimensions the mind, I don't know, the psyche, and I would also call the cyber. Okay, now the cyber was a dimension that I kind of knew about for quite a very long time, and the cyber was nothing else than intelligence. Okay, it is not the intelligence that we attribute to people or animals, it is the code that lies beyond. Okay, so it is, as I would call it from my own, let's say, experiences, it is a dimension beyond the mind itself and the idea of the psyche. Okay, the cybernetic dimension was always to me like a pyramid, okay, with a triangular base. So there was the mind, there was the spirit, there was the psyche, which represented the base of the pyramid, okay, and then going upwards and uniting in one single point, that was the cyber dimension. Okay, so the cybernetic dimension was literally just like computers. It was a dimension where everything would be much faster, everything would be unbiased. Okay, the only reason things are very slow in the human mind is because of processing. Now, processing power is what I would attribute to discernment. Okay, so if you're not knowledgeable to programming, okay, everything that people take into account, okay, goes through what one may call analysis. Okay, like, let's say for example, when people start thinking about certain things, it's like when you give your interpreter the idea to go through 1,000 different conditionals. Okay, if you put them as separate conditionals, okay, every time the code is read, the interpreter has to read each and every conditional, right? And any of those, if it's true, then it executes its code, else it is false. Of course, when I was that age, I didn't know about programming, but the point is, as I started diving into programming quite not long ago, like almost a year ago, the point is, I felt that JavaScript actually chose me instead of me choosing JavaScript, for example. So the point is, all those years while I was young, I would keep receiving these answers, and nowadays through programming and especially video games, I would understand why I would get those answers, because they are finally like the puzzle pieces. Okay, and every time people create meaning, okay, they get stuck into that meaning. Okay, because meaning is just like a conditional. Okay, if that meaning has any value to you, then it is important. Now, what does it mean to actually be important? Every meaning that exists in this world exists because of a story. there is always a story behind every meaning, okay? Your favorite toy is important to you because it has a background story, right? Your, I don't know, your friends are your best friends, right? Your best friends are your closest friends, right? Because there are stories behind them. Now, in many situations, these stories are also fantasized, okay? And since nowadays we live in a kind of a sick world, but the world has kind of always been sick, it's just that it's becoming sicker and sicker, and only nowadays we seem to be waking up to a reality where we kind of seem to be discovering the extent of the sickness, and we can actually see it reflected in the society nowadays. The point about these stories is that nowadays people believe that the more you suffer, actually the better things are, okay? Because suffering is also a story, okay? In order to suffer, you have to do certain things that cause you suffering, okay? In order to suffer, you actually need to have some sort of dis-ease in your body, okay? Now that dis-ease is technically a story of itself, right? Which goes much deeper. And you know, the suffering is nothing else than, well, again, another story, but it is the somewhat visible story, okay? Now, the story can actually be a fake one or can be a true one, because the person can fake suffering or the person can be like specifically suffering, right? And as they suffer, right, it's up to people to realize the story, it's true or it's false, right? But the main question is, okay, it's actually the switch. Okay, in video games you're probably gonna hear this now. You know, like, I've been working in RPG Maker for like more than 2500 hours, so the term switch for me is quite important. It's technically something that is either true or false, just like the switch that you use to turn something on or off, right? So these switches are very important because the meaning switch is actually the most important, okay? When you place importance to something, you've technically downloaded a code within you, right? If someone comes to you, you don't even know them, and they start crying to you, right? They're one of those freeloaders, right? Like, they just come and they dump their shit on you, right? It's up to you to choose. And it is a choice, and most likely you're gonna do it subconsciously if you're not aware enough, and you're gonna take the misery of that person on yourself, because this is how actually things go. Like, if you choose to accept that code, and most likely, as I said, you will choose it subconsciously, because the subconscious rules around 90 to 90%, in most people's cases even 100%, because, you know, most people just don't live their life, they just go by impulse. And when people work by impulse and function by impulse, technically they're not alive, because to be alive means to take decisions, right? To make decisions, not let any circumstance take the decisions for you. Now again, there is this idea that you can't change the whole circumstance, but at least you can choose to pull as much positivity on your side as possible, right? It's also part of alchemy in a way, being capable of turning negativity into positivity. And you see, if you're new to my YouTube channel, I prefer over delivering, and I also prefer speaking a lot and presenting through different parentheses. You know, an introduction, usually the introduction is much broader, because I don't want people to receive a flat answer, okay? Because is there anything beyond law? I can simply come up with 2 or 3 things to say and I could have a flat answer, but this is not what I want, okay? I want people to understand the power of introspection. I've been introspective for more than 15 years, and actually ever since I was young, but let's say at least 15 years, I would receive all sorts of answers and ideas. So the point is that based on these, my life actually constantly improved. All the time I would just continuously bombard the universe with questions, and sooner or later, even after years, the answers would come. But you have to understand, the answers will come when you feel ready. Okay, because if you're not ready, you're not gonna accept them. You remember probably those times when you tell people certain things, you know them, you have experienced them, but they're gonna laugh in your face, or they're simply gonna say that their idea is better. Good. So you're gonna get pissed because somewhere within you, you have a story again that says you are not trustworthy in the eyes of your friends, right? And remember, your beliefs create reality, because those people, they are not ready, and they will tell you that, hey, you know what, you suck or whatever, my ideas are better, because I'm gonna do and I'm gonna stick to my ideas. Your purpose on this world is not to shift others, okay? It's been the purpose of society to shift others throughout the time, because we live in a 3-dimension level of consciousness, which means control, right? It also correlates powerfully with the solar plexus chakra, right, the Manipura, which governs the idea of power and control. Some also call it the seat of the ego, but people don't understand what the ego is, well, in many cases. I call it an ancient construct that has one single purpose, which is to protect you. And also beyond the ego, there are the lower voices, as I'd call them. These lower voices are nothing else than the sabotaging, the self-hatred, and other shit that you have taken from other people. And why do you still have those within you? It's again because of stories, right? Those stories that those people would tell you, even from youth, okay? You were defenseless against those, so you actually placed a great importance to them. So their switch is technically on, right? To speak in terms of programming. And every time you accept new and new and new things, right? It's like you have to iterate through all the shit again and again and again. It's like a loop that goes back in your mind. Thousands of these loops, hundreds or dozens, depends on how much shit you have taken from people, but I assure you it's in the millions, because that's how we all are. And empathy draws things from everything around you, the environment also. You know, you can watch my video about the pendulum effect and discover how the environment itself can actually pull you down or can uplift you in certain situations, but it all depends on your own vibration. Now, throughout history, the point was that this whole life is nothing else than an experiment. If you're wondering why you are here, well, you're nothing else than a brave soul, although I don't like the term soul, but okay, let's actually call it like this. You're a brave facet of consciousness, as I call it. And this facet of consciousness, this little bit of consciousness that you are, okay, a projection of some sort, okay, a projection that's unique in its own way, but again it carries the whole consciousness within. This little facet of consciousness that you are is on a mission to become again the full consciousness, okay, to become one with the cosmic existence, right, one with creation. So in order to do this, the point is that you have to go through millions, maybe, right? There are some yogic sources that state you'll need around 8.4 million or billion lives to experience, not only on this universe but in many other universes, to experience in order to gain the wisdom that's necessary to become one with consciousness, okay? And people can actually experience multiple lives at the same time. Now again, all these things that I'm saying, do try to become introspective to see whether you resonate, whether you find these answers yourself, because we are all here to experience our own truths. Now, society has always been a point of control, because you see, ever since a certain point, okay, in life, people simply started to push their power away. Most likely because of not knowing that, but I kind of doubt it. It's more likely because people simply gave themselves freely to demons or whatever would rule them, because many people would think that suffering is too much. And suffering means also a lack, okay, because when you have suffering, it's technically a lack of peace, right? Because you're suffering because you don't have peace. In whatever way or shape, right? You don't have peace of mind, don't have peace of a certain part of your body, and well, that's technically the peace is technically the opposite of dis-ease, right? Because when you have peace, your body is at ease. When you don't have any peace, or you know, a part of you is imbalanced, right? There is not enough peace in there, then well, your whole body or that part of your body is in dis-ease, okay? So the law has been created as a means to rule the world, okay? Now, of course, let's not necessarily rush into constipational theories, but you have to understand that no one actually taught parents how to raise their children, right? So parents have always been abusive because they were abused themselves. And negativity and entropy always work in pair, because entropy means the natural way of things to get worse and worse. And people would finally start thinking that life is shit, nothing good will ever happen to them, right? And all these demons and parasitic thought forms that have been created by previous generations are passed on to the next generations, and well, they just function based on the code they were created on, right? Every time you curse, you're creating thought forms that, well, most likely will keep dwelling into your auric field, into your mind, right? And they will feed off of your hatred, your self-hatred, your repulsion, whatever possible thing. Now, these thought forms aren't necessarily evil. They're, well, in the end, embrace them because they're your creation. You have to make peace with these, okay? Because the more you acquiesce, the more you give your power to such forms, okay, the more distress you will feel. The more you will be in dis-ease, therefore the more you will suffer, because that's how life actually works. Now, how this thing works is very simple. These people became more and more abusive. They would abuse their children, they would create all sort of thoughts like, I'm gonna get married because everyone else is getting married, I'm gonna have a child because everyone else has children, right? And everyone does things just because everyone else does. And at this point, throughout history and ever since then, things have become more and more chaotic because, well, there's only been sickness. When you give birth to children just because everyone else has them, most likely you don't want those children, and then there's only gonna be regret, and regret leads to repulsion, and repulsion leads to violence, right? And violence, of course, leads to all sorts of abuse. And those abused children will end up being abusers, and so on and so forth. And with these people suffering more and more and inducing even more suffering on themselves, right, they start acquiescing, and instead they just prefer to embrace this futile state of suffering. Every time these people suffer, they think it's the only way to live life, because also religion started at a certain point to say, give all your riches and you will live abundantly in heaven, right? Like, for example, Christianity. But the question was, okay, if you have to give all your riches, why were all the churches so rich, right? Because everything is more or less a point of control. You have to understand that those abused people, some abused people, get ahead of a certain country, of a certain state, of whatever, and those people, okay, as I've spoken in other videos, those people are nothing else than their own traumas, right? This is called karma, when your past becomes your future. When you don't make peace with everything that you have in your past, all your wounds, then all those will just propagate into your future. And as I've said in previous videos, but indirectly, the point is, when you address a certain person, you only address them by their pains, okay, by their suffering, because you have to understand it. To me, I really cannot care, and I said cannot, not don't, because it's a passive aspect. I simply cannot care what a person's specialization is. They might be the best programmer, they might be the best person in the the field of justice, for example. I simply cannot care how good they are called to be, or how good they consider themselves to be, or how good society considers them to be. So long as people have these traumas, okay, these traumas will always play a role in their decisions, right? So a judge will also have their decision making influenced to a certain extent, more or less, by their subconscious mind, which holds their pains, right, from this current life and previous lives, right? So you can never ever say that the law of this society will be represented ever by people who simply have no traumas, unless you put some highly specialized gurus, or people who know how to cure traumas, okay? Because as long as this exists, there will always be abuses of power. That's why you have abuse of power from law enforcers, from politicians, and, well, everything else, right? Even in families and the such. So don't take this fully politically or from a standpoint of the legal system, okay? The point about the law, initially, it was to present some sort of stability in the state. But you have to understand that every time you hear the ideas of law and peace and order, and especially order, or something being done for your better good, this is nothing else than a code name for control, because the law doesn't do anything else than controlling you, okay? Why do we need a law? Because we have a sick society, that is why. if you have a fully civilized society, okay, you don't need a law because people already feel what they have to do, right? The problem with the law is something that you are enforcing upon people, okay? Law is something that you enforce on people. That is why you have law enforcers, right? If you cultivate people, right? Now why the law is actually bad? It is bad because it's doing nothing else than misery, right? It's created by people who are miserable, right? And it's made to rule other people who are miserable, and these are the masses who are miserable. So you'll never ever achieve a balance because both sides are actually miserable, okay? You have to create something like a true school, which kind of doesn't exist because most teachers nowadays are just taught, you know, they are just taught information. Teachers nowadays, there are very few teachers who really know how to teach, because teaching is not giving information. Giving information is easy, especially nowadays with the internet. You can find all the information on the internet. Any information that your teacher can teach you at school, you can actually find it on the internet. The purpose of a teacher, okay, is to teach you what information would be most suitable to you. Technically, the teacher has to be kind of a little guru, okay? But the difference in between a guru and a teacher is that the teacher knows a lot of things, right? But may not necessarily have introspection, right? The guru is all about introspection. It's all about perception. When you are a guru, you perceive things beyond the mental, which, well, the mental remains the field of the teacher. Now you have to combine both of them, because in order to exist in this world you have to use your mind, but it's also good to understand that there are things beyond this mental dimension and beyond this idea of characterizing things and putting all sorts of meaning, because meaning is nothing else than a self-destruction button, and each and every person will have a different meaning on things. That is why you have criminals, because criminals may induce upon themselves a different sensation or a different meaning of the law, right? Technically, everyone is beyond the law, because the law, as I said, is nothing else than a tool to control and a tool to have the masses acquiesce, okay? You simply can see even nowadays that people just give their power easily, you know, too easily. Like one moment everything was fine, the very next hour everyone was wearing a face mask, right? This is how easily people acquiesce, because they simply don't care for themselves. You have to understand that these people will simply fight for the law because they hate change. They don't want change, but they simply cannot understand that change is the only consonant. So when it comes to the law, okay, the law is nothing else than a kind of a primitive way of ruling, you know, uncivilized, let's say, urges, okay? Its initial way, okay, in the ideas of tribes, okay, you had the leader, right? The leader had to install order, but the leader had simply no power, right? Everyone else agreed collectively that that person would be the leader, and judging by the type of the leader, you could simply feel the aura of that collective, because if they would agree to an abusive leader, well, again, they have some karma to cleanse, yes, but again, that kind of says everything about those, right? Because if they agree to having an abusive leader, you can simply understand how easily they give up their power. If they only choose to have a leader to truly represent them, like you can still see in many countries nowadays, well, that's a sign that that population is still very very healthy, right? Now, have you ever wondered why we need leaders and, well, in the worst case scenarios, bosses? Well, because people simply acquiesce. We will always have a law, and we will always have the need for control and power, because people simply give their power to such constructs, okay? These people, it's never their fault, right? But so many people just say, oh my god, this dumb government, these politicians, these, it's like, what is actually politics, okay? If you take politics in occult English, it's actually a pile of ticks, okay? It's actually ticks that suck away your life and your money and the such, in a way. But it is not their fault. It is your collective fault as humans that you allow those people to do that. Okay, you have to understand that it's never their fault. You allow them to do that, and they're just doing their work. Irrespective of how dumb or ingenious they are just doing their work. So always look within yourself. okay, and try to have other people understand, but don't force them to understand that they need to stop giving their power, okay. As long as people will give their power, there will always be an idea of law. Now the main importance, or actually the main pillar of the law is actually nothing else than ignorance. Wherever you have ignorance, you have a law, because ignorant people are the biggest problem. Ignorant people will self-disregard, right? They will disregard themselves, so it means they will not, or they will never ever commit to education, because education stems from the Latin educario, which means to raise, right? To raise beyond the idea of ignorance, okay? To raise from ignorance, right? To separate from ignorance, right? To elevate, to enlighten in a certain way, because that's actually what enlightenment means. Going beyond ignorance, because ignorance means accepting a certain amount of rules, right? Accepting a certain amount of stories, actually, because rules are nothing else than stories as well. In my country, there is a quote that says, the hand which begs, or let's say the beggar who begs without a story, they don't receive anything to eat, right? Because if you don't have a story, you're not going to impress people. Stories are good to impress, because in the older times, when people would go hunting and they would start teaching their children, they would also give all of these stories, right? Again, some might actually be a bit of lies, okay, like they would be augmented to make the storytellers look much better in the eyes of the others. But storytelling has always been something good. Back in the times, there was no such thing as internet, and there was always this aspect of socializing, okay. People would gather by a fire, or they would gather in a little circle, and they would present different stories and ideas. So everything beyond the law, yes, there are, because everyone who abuses technically is beyond the law. Now you have to understand that law enforcers are also beyond the law in a way, because people give them the power, okay. That is why you have so many people as law enforcers that commit to abuses, because the law has to rule over masses that are, well, in most cases ignorant, but at the same time the ignorance of the masses allows people to enter great societal places, right, like politics and law enforcement, okay. And such people from the masses of ignorant people end up in there, and then they start abusing, right? And these abusers are actually collectively accepted by the masses, and this means that those people who are collectively accepted there, they are beyond the law, right? Because if you look in any state where you have a lot of crime and such, okay, technically there is no law. Just because there is some dumb writing somewhere, right, called a constitution, as I call it, right, with an accent on cunt, right, it doesn't mean that it actually has a law, right? The law means having competent folks, right, competent forces that can actually combat ignorance, because that is actually the greatest evil on this planet, and it is actually the greatest enemy of any normal society, any healthy society, actually, because there is no such thing as a normal society. There is only a healthy society, and a healthy society can be in thousands of ways, right? And you have to understand that this normal is highly overrated, because normal is always again an explosive meaning, and meaning is already like a ticking bomb, okay. This point of meaning, giving meaning, is nothing else than what serves you, okay, what stories serve you, and everything else is shit, right? This is kind of similar to fanaticism. Now the law is again nothing else than something that has to be supported by people who know how to combat the idea of ignorance. How to combat ignorance is to create the next breed of teachers, teachers who know how to spark the curiosity of children, because school does nothing else than stealing the curiosity of children and cutting it out. Because when children go to school, they go very lively and they have a lot of ideas, but school only teaches you the one and same thing that it has been teaching everyone till then, and it never allows people to accept anything else. And you can see this same sickness exists and has always existed. For example, in religion, religion always states something like this, right? There is a fixed structure and there cannot be anything else beyond that, right? And when any other religions come, in many situations they cannot coexist, because even if they believe in one single God, right, like for example Christianity believes in one single God, and at the same time the Arabs believe in one single God, right? But there will always be this contrast. But it's not necessarily a contrast, it's just that people put so much meaning on something that technically is useless, okay? You don't need to call creation in a certain way, because it is creation. You can never understand creation from the standpoint of the mind, because the mind is just something so inferior. That is one of the biggest problems in society, that people try to attach so much meaning to literally all the things, and many of the things actually go beyond the mind, because that's how things are, okay? Things go beyond the mind because, well, not everything belongs to this three-dimensional being, but here we are. And guess what? Worse than religion, who has, like, for 2000 years has created the most darkness in Europe, okay, has prevented any development of Europe, okay? Now we also have science nowadays, and science is again nothing else than a representation of our sickness, okay? It's acting exactly the same as religion, for example, because some people have the impression that they have the power, they have the knowledge, and you know, it's always ignorant people, okay? They have this impression that they know everything, okay? Only dumb people have a feeling that they know everything, okay? And I really cannot care if I hurt someone, okay? I really cannot care how long someone has been working in science, but you simply cannot project the whole, you know, puny amount of physics that we have learned from this planet, okay? You cannot project it on the entirety of the universe, because everything in the universe functions completely differently. You cannot make assumptions on a certain planet, okay, beyond our reach, okay? One of the most important things of education is never ever accept something that is beyond your experience, okay? When you have a certain experience, that is an experience. It is something true, it happened to you. Irrespective of how many voices will tell you that you're nuts, you're insane, you must see a psychiatrist or something like that, you've seen a ghost, you've seen whatever, you've seen angels, whatever, it happened to you, it is actually your truth, okay? To many people it may not happen, yes, but it's another tough thing to learn, that, you know, some of your truths should be better not to be spread with others. Now the point about law is that, again, it is nothing else than an enforcement, right? When it is an enforcement, there is a story behind that, okay? And beyond each story there is usually a fear, okay? There is a fear of rejection, and there is a fear of there is a fear of failure, right? Because people who promote the law, they don't want anything else than to rule, right? There are very few people who would promote the law just because in theory it would be that thing that would keep people united. The reason why the law will never keep people united is because law can only be enforced, right? Because as long as you have illiteracy in your society, right, you will never ever have something beyond law, because the law has to be enforced so that you keep ignorance to their place. But ignorance will always think that they are the best in this world. Ignorance will always abuse other people, and they are usually the result of abuse, and well, abuse usually gives breeds, actually breeds at least slight narcissists and or sociopaths, if not the best of both worlds. So this is what society technically reeks of, okay? Now, not everyone is a narcissist and or a sociopath, yes, but such features exist in each and every one of us, because we all have been through at least a bit of abuse in our life, okay? In order to be a fully fledged narcissist or sociopath, there is a whole test to be taken. There are around 40 points, I think, nowadays to be taken. I'm only knowledgeable a bit about that, okay? Now, the point about this is teachers have to be taught how to spark the curiosity of children, because through curiosity and a little sense of philosophy, okay, not too much, because if you give too much power to the mind, if you let the mind wander too much, you're gonna end up with science, okay? Because science, there are, let's say, the mathematical sciences, okay, those you cannot argue against, because 2 plus 2 will equal 4, but well, 2 plus 2 will equal 4 on this planet. You don't know if you go to another galaxy, probably gravity acts in a certain way, there are other distortions, so who knows, maybe 2 plus 2 will equal something else. You never know. But again, the mind is given too much importance, and people are stuck in that little box, and they will say, no, 2 plus 2 equals 4, it is a universal rule. But you have to understand that universal means that applies to the whole universe. You haven't gone probably beyond a few countries, okay, let alone beyond your planet. So how come do you actually come up with ideas about the whole universe? There are dumb people on this planet that believe that we are the only creation in this universe. Dude, this universe has billions of galaxies, if not billions of galaxies, okay, with as many stars at least within them, right? And those stars add 3 or 4 times more planets, right? At least 10% of these, let's say 1%, okay, can actually house life in any primitive form at least, okay? Because you have to understand, life is not just physical, right? You have to go beyond all these prisons, right? That life can only be biological, life can only be carbon based, life can only be like this. This is only a prison that we have created, right? We have understood that water only freezes at that temperature, water boils only at that temperature, only on this planet, right? All these are signs of ignorance, and science is full of ignorance that believe that if you don't say like me, you're a heretic. That's the same thing that religion has been saying, okay? At least, or especially Christianity in Europe. For 2000 years, Europe has been the darkest continent ever. It has been the darkest age of humanity, okay, in which everything was done, you know, like everything illegal, everything beyond this so-called law that theoretically appeared, okay, was done just to punish and murder, brutalize and kill. That's nothing else than pinpoints of a profoundly sick society, which actually improved that even more, okay? So unless you create a breed of teachers that know how to spark interest in children, how to allow their ingenious ideas, okay, because children come with a pure mind, okay, they are connected to the universe. If you learn how to preserve this connection within them and keep that connection for at least 7 to 8 years, then you can actually start teaching them about the beauty of the universe, the connection of things, and then you can actually start learning things from children, because they come with fresh experiences. They are fresh minds that can understand the world instead of being inhibited by stupid concepts. And once you create such generations of people, you will no longer need people who are necessarily scientists, okay, because scientists nowadays is nothing else than a title, okay. You can have your whole population work towards something instead of just having 3 people who are just scientists, okay, or you know, 3 people out of 10 to be scientists, okay. The more minds you have towards something, well, the more you can actually understand certain things, right? And you can just look around, okay. So many people feel that they have no purpose in this life, but just look around, everything is crumbling. You can always do something to try to fix something. You can always plant a new tree. You can always fight for the, you know, the rights of certain animals whose environments are taken away, right? You can always find people on the internet and use your power, okay. You don't need the law. The law is only here to combat, to a certain extent, the idea of ignorance. And ignorance will only be purged when you have a breed of teachers that don't teach ignorance, okay. They teach how to explore the world, how to give, you know, half a lesson in such a curious manner that you will have children come back at home and say, oh my god, this lesson was so cool, it was taught in such a way that I really want to learn more. That's how you teach people. It's not about the PowerPoints, it's not about the slides, it's not about necessarily the subject or the topic. The topic can easily be found on the internet. The only thing you have to do as a teacher is teach people how to actually find the information, right? You have to teach people how to teach themselves. That's your purpose as a teacher. It's kind of the same purpose as a guru, but a guru will go beyond the mind, okay? They will teach you how to discover yourselves, okay? They are there for certain things, okay? If you want, and in many situations, yes, a guru may not necessarily be someone who has been civilized, okay? But a guru is the one who will help you go beyond the path that is, you know, beyond the mind, and you're there suddenly somewhere that you don't know, and you can easily get lost, right? Because if you want to go in a mountain, okay, and you want to go past the mountain, okay, you have this person who is completely illiterate, okay. Will you trust them to actually get you past the mountain? It's like, what if they have been doing that for 20 years? Like, I cannot care if they are illiterate, because if they know the path around the mountain, right, I mean through the mountain, okay, and I can actually, you know, go follow that person and reach the other part of the mountain safely, right? And most likely these people are pointed by other people, because, you know, people get to trust such people. It's always good to follow them. Sure, you can also follow the path through the mountain that, you know, your feet will take, but, you know, you can end up dead. That's how children end up in society. They follow teachers, and, well, teachers, they have been taught ignorance and they will teach ignorance. So all these things being said, hopefully you've liked the type of content that I've created. Feel free to like and subscribe if you like this. Feel free to share it with other people, so that together we can raise the consciousness of people around us. And, well, all things considered, well, keep sending some of your wisdom towards me, and so that we can, you know, learn one from the other. And, well, keep sharing my content if you want, and also you can show people the way towards my account if you want, right, so that they can view other ideas of mine, right? They can dive deeper into some aspects that I'm presenting. All these things being said, you are loved and appreciated. Take care, and, well, have fun, enjoy life. Remember, life is just a game, so play the game, don't let yourself be played by the game. You are loved and appreciated. Ferin Can Bor signing out.